Marcus always felt like his life was teetering on the edge of collapse. After nearly a decade working as a supermarket manager in a downtown city, the daily chaos had drained him dry. Angry customers, unrealistic sales goals, and indifferent higher-ups had become his norm. Sleep was scarce, and stomach pains were constant, his body's way of screaming for escape. One night, restless and scrolling through job listings at 2 a.m., he stumbled across a posting that seemed too perfect to be real. Night security guard, Ridgeway Mall, quiet, isolated, excellent pay. The description was short and vague, with no corporate jargon or overpromises. Just a location, a phone number, and a note at the bottom. Immediate availability preferred. Curious and with nothing to lose, Marcus called. To his surprise, someone picked up on the first ring. A calm, friendly voice introduced himself as Mr. Harlan, the mall manager. There was no screening process, just a few questions about availability and experience. "We're looking for someone who won't ask too many questions," Harlan had said, half joking. An interview was scheduled for the next day. It lasted less than 15 minutes. Before Marcus could even process what was happening, Mr. Harlan was shaking his hand and offering him the job. "You'll start tomorrow night," Harlan said, slipping a sealed envelope into Marcus's hand. "Don't open this until your first shift." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is this some kind of NDA?" "Something like that." Harlan smiled, his eyes unreadable. "You'll see." As Marcus drove home, his thoughts were scattered but oddly hopeful. A quiet job, good pay, no screaming customers. It sounded like a dream. But deep down, something in that envelope was already whispering, "This place is different." The mall looked abandoned from the outside. Ridgeway sat at the edge of a forgotten town, its vast parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds. Marcus pulled up at 10:43 p.m. sharp, unsure if he was early or already too late. The only lights came from flickering neon signs above empty storefronts. As he stepped out of the car, the distant sound of cicadas filled the silence. A side door was left slightly ajar, and a small piece of tape held a handwritten note. "Security, Marcus. Come in." He stepped through into dimly lit halls lined with empty mannequins and dusty display windows. The air inside was stale, like a sealed box reopened after years. He found the security office near the food court, a modest room with a long desk, several monitors, and a dusty coffee machine that looked older than the mall itself. On the chair sat the envelope Mr. Harlan had given him. Finally, alone and curious, Marcus opened it. Inside was a laminated sheet with bold red lettering at the top. "Ridgeway Mall, Night Shift Protocol, do not deviate." Below, 5 rules, each stranger than the last. Rule 1. All storefront lights must remain on during your shift. If one goes out, restore power immediately. If it won't come back on, leave the area and do not return until daylight. Rule 2. At exactly 1:17 a.m., a child may appear in the food court. Do not interact. Do not respond. Rule 3. If the central fountain water changes color, especially red, seek shelter in the camera room and lock the door. Rule 4. If you see a woman dressed in 1980s fashion inside the nail salon mirror, do not approach or allow her to exit the store. Rule 5. Between 3 a.m. and 3:10 a.m., avoid all reflections. Mirrors, glass, monitors, everything. Marcus blinked. Was this a joke? A test? He stared at the rules again, half expecting invisible ink or a hidden camera. But the ink didn't vanish, and the silence around him only grew heavier. Midnight crept in without fanfare. The mall remained eerily still, the only sound a soft electrical hum from aging light fixtures. Marcus sat behind the security desk, sipping burnt coffee and scanning the feeds from the outdated cameras. Everything seemed normal, if a bit sad. Storefronts with sale signs from months ago, a carousel in the atrium that hadn't spun in years, and plastic plants collecting dust. He glanced at the laminated rules again, now propped beside the monitor. It felt absurd. Ghost kids, bloody fountains, reflections that could kill. He chuckled, shaking his head. Harlan must have a weird sense of humor, he muttered to himself, just before something caught his eye. Camera 5, pointed at a boutique near the west wing, flickered. Then, darkness. Marcus leaned forward. The store's lights had shut off completely, the only blackout on the grid. Remembering Rule 1, he stood slowly, flashlight in hand. His boots echoed across the polished floor as he approached the boutique. Everything was dead silent. Until he crossed the threshold. A strange cold settled in his chest. The mannequins, dressed in tattered vintage wear, seemed positioned just slightly wrong, like they'd been caught mid-movement. He reached for the light switch, flicked it. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. Suddenly, soft static hissed in his ear, though he wasn't wearing an earpiece. A breath. Then whispering, right next to his ear. Unintelligible but urgent. Marcus turned around sharply, but the hallway behind him was empty. His heart pounded. He backed away, walking fast, resisting the urge to run. Just as he exited the boutique zone, the lights flicked back on by themselves. All at once. The mannequins stood still again, innocent and lifeless. But Marcus didn't go back to check. He returned to the desk and sat heavily in the chair, trying to laugh it off. The joke, if that's what this was, wasn't funny anymore. 1:12 a.m. The digital clock on the monitor blinked steadily, each passing second stretching longer than the last. Marcus had his eyes glued to the food court camera, half in disbelief that he was actually preparing for the arrival of some ghost child. Don't interact, the rule said. Don't respond. Easy enough, if it were real. But that moment in the boutique still lingered in his mind. The cold, the whispers, the flickering light. Maybe it wasn't just a prank. Maybe this was real. 1:16 a.m. Marcus leaned in. The food court sat in stillness, a half-lit expanse of empty tables and abandoned eateries. Then, just as the clock ticked to 1:17, the camera blinked once, and the boy appeared. He stood by the old fountain, barefoot, wearing a pale blue t-shirt and yellow pajama pants. No noise, no movement. Just there. A frozen smile on his face, eyes wide and glassy. Marcus held his breath. The boy looked directly into the camera. And then, cut. The feed distorted, then came back. Now the boy was standing next to a plastic bench. No walking, no transition. Just another blink, and he had moved. Marcus stood and slowly crept to the edge of the food court corridor, peering around the corner. Nothing. The benches were empty. He checked the camera again. The boy was now standing at the entrance to the security wing. Marcus's heart dropped. The screen blinked again, and the boy vanished from view. Then came a knock. Software rhythmic, on the door just 10 feet behind him. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. The knock repeated, slower this time. Then silence. A minute passed. 2, then 5. He finally turned to the door's small window and peeked through. No one was there. He sank back into his chair, breath shaky, eyes darting around the room. The clock now read 1:27 a.m. 9 minutes of fear, but he was still alive. One rule down. 4 to go. 2:38 a.m. The minutes had oozed by like cold syrup, each tick of the clock heavier than the last. Marcus hadn't left his post since the child vanished. He hadn't even dared stand. Every camera had returned to normal. Every corridor, every bench, every exit was still. But the unease hadn't left his chest. He kept staring at the screen labeled Cam 1-Atrium, which gave a direct view of the central fountain. The water was still flowing, smooth and silent. But then something shifted. A glint of color. Not the blue tint of chlorine, but something darker, something red. Slowly, the entire basin rippled and turned crimson. Bubbles rose to the surface like blood boiling from underground. Marcus bolted upright, heart hammering. Rule 3. The laminated list flashed in his mind. If the fountain water turns red, seek shelter in the camera room and lock the door. No hesitation. He slammed the door shut behind him, bolted it, and backed away until his spine hit the wall. The camera screen now showed a distorted, pulsing image. The fountain looked deeper, vast, almost bottomless. But that wasn't the worst part. From the shadow beneath the surface, a shape emerged. Tall, thin. It stood still, partially obscured by red water. Then it turned, slowly, its head tilted, eyes just empty black holes on an otherwise featureless face. As if sensing the camera, it reached a bony hand toward the lens. A heavy thud struck the hallway door. Marcus jumped, eyes darting to the entryway. Another thud. Wet, dragging sounds, then something scraped along the outer wall, slow and deliberate, as though a long nail was being dragged across the surface. He covered his mouth to muffle his breathing. Then, silence. For 20 agonizing minutes. Marcus sat frozen. Only when the camera feed flickered back to normal and the fountain water resumed its blue shimmer did he dare unbolt the door and step out. Nothing was there. But the red footprints drying near the fountain told him it hadn't been his imagination. 3 a.m. The number glared from the monitor like a warning siren, silent but deafening. Marcus wiped the sweat from his neck and tried to steady his nerves. He was rattled. The boy, the blood, that thing in the fountain. But the night wasn't over, not by a long shot. Rule 4 was next. If a woman in 1980s clothing appears in the nail salon mirror, do not approach or let her out. He scanned the feeds. Most cameras showed nothing new, but then, movement. Cam 9. Nail pop. The old nail salon. His door was shut, lights off. But inside, in the large mirror that faced the lobby, he saw a flicker of color, red, pink, and turquoise. Shoulder pads, hairspray, leg warmers, a woman. Marcus leaned forward, squinting. Her back was turned to the room, but her face stared out through the mirror, directly at the camera. She looked like someone pulled from a forgotten magazine ad. Lips too red, eyes outlined in a thick smudge of blue. And then, as if aware she was being watched, she raised her hand and tapped gently on the mirror from the inside. Tap, tap, tap. Marcus's throat went dry. She smiled. Then her hand pressed flat against the mirror. The glass rippled just slightly, enough to send panic crawling up his spine. He remembered the rule. Do not let her out. But what did that mean? Was she trying to escape through the mirror? The camera blinked. In the next frame, her face was inches from the glass. Her smile was wider now, impossibly so. Her lipstick smeared across her cheek like blood. She opened her mouth slowly, but there was no sound. Just the image of her screaming silently, endlessly, until the screen fuzzed into static. Marcus pushed back from the monitor, afraid she might somehow come through. He turned off the feed for Cam 9. He wouldn't watch. He wouldn't go near that salon. Not until the sun was up. The mirror woman would stay inside, at least for now. 3 a.m. to 3:10 a.m., 10 minutes. That was all Marcus had to survive. Rule 5 looped over and over in his mind, like a mantra. Between 3 a.m. and 3:10 a.m., avoid all reflections. Mirrors, glass, camera screens. Anything that might show him himself. Simple in theory, terrifying in execution. He pulled his hoodie over his head and ducked under the desk. The monitors were turned away. Even the reflection in the glossy floor tiles made him uneasy. His phone's black screen, the coffee pot's metal finish, every shiny surface became a threat. He'd never realized how many things in a mall reflected back at you. And now, any one of them could be fatal. He kept his eyes low, breathing slow and steady. 5 minutes in, something began tapping on the glass behind the security desk. Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, persistent. Marcus didn't dare look, didn't even move. Then came a voice, a perfect mimic of his own. "Come on, man. It's fine. Just a peek." His jaw clenched. "You have to check the monitors. What if something's happening?" It said again, this time with urgency. "You don't want to miss the next rule, do you?" He closed his eyes and began counting seconds. 37, 38, 39. The tapping grew louder. Now it wasn't a voice. It was laughter. A chorus of Marcus's laughing, distorted and overlapping like a broken echo. He curled tighter under the desk, hands over his ears. Then, silence. 10 seconds left. 9, 8. He heard the desk chair roll slightly, as if someone, or something, had just sat in it. 3, 2, 1, then click. The lights buzzed. The pressure in the air vanished. It was 3:10 a.m. Marcus peeked out slowly. The chair was empty, the monitors were clear, and the window behind the desk, clean. His reflection looked normal again. Tired, but still his own. But he knew it wasn't over. And something told him dawn wouldn't come easy. 4:52 a.m. The first traces of daylight crept through the skylights above the food court, casting long, pale streaks across the tile floor. Marcus was still behind the security desk, stiff and silent, eyes darting between the dimming monitors. Nothing else had appeared. No children, no shadows, no laughter. Just the silence of a forgotten mall greeting the end of a long, cursed night. Then, at 5:01, he heard footsteps, normal ones. Shoes, not boots. Calm, unhurried. Mr. Harlan appeared from the far corridor holding 2 steaming coffees and a folder tucked under his arm. "Still breathing," he said with a half smile, setting the coffee on the counter in front of Marcus. "Good sign." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He reached for the cup, hands trembling, and took a long sip before finally speaking. "What the hell was that?" Harlan didn't answer at first. He slid the folder across the counter. Inside was a packet of onboarding forms and a thick envelope bulging with cash. "Hazard pay," Harlan said simply. "And your contract, if you want to sign it." "You should have warned me. If I had, you would have laughed and walked away. Everyone does. But now you know." Marcus stared at the envelope. The money was real. The contract was simple. No hidden clauses. Just one sentence stood out. Night shift duties require strict rule adherence. No exceptions. Harlan stood, stretching. "Your call. You're free to walk out that door and forget this place ever existed. Or you can stay. And next time, it won't hit quite as hard." Marcus looked toward the glass entrance. The sun was rising, lighting up the dust and silence. He should have run, but the thought of going back to his old life. Screaming customers, corporate memos, fluorescent hell. Somehow, This nightmare felt more honest. He reached for the pen,